Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our latest ICON webinar on navigating the technology landscape. What are the most valuable solutions to meet the current and future industry challenges? We have an expert panel today who will be discussing their experience of how they have adopted technology to solve challenges caused by COVID-19 and also how it should be viewed in the longer term strategy. My name is Lindsay Bryson and I'm an Innovation Manager with Construction Scotland Innovation Centre, and our panellists today consist of Jason Fraser, Technology Director from Norscot, Jonathan Davies, Account Executive from Autodesk, John Simpson, who is Head of Digital Construction at Robertson Group, Stephen Kelso, Design Manager from Cala Group, and Stephen Milne, Business Development Manager from our sister innovation centre, Census. Now, just a couple of points of housekeeping first. This session will be recorded and will be available afterwards on our CSIC YouTube channel. Links will be sent out for that. We would welcome the questions being asked during the session, and you'll be able to do this through the chat box. If we cannot answer all the questions during this session, we will take a note of them and we will answer as many as we can afterwards and issue the answers to all attendees. And there will be a few polls throughout this just to get a bit of interactivity, and I'll explain a little bit towards the end about what we're going to do with the information from those polls. So just a quick running order first of all, there'll be a quick poll first, and then I am going to do a very quick summary of some of the types of technology that we at the Innovation Centre have seen becoming into use in light of the COVID crisis. And then we'll move on to the questions with our panellists. We have some set questions for each of them, and then you'll have your opportunity to ask your own questions as well. So I'd just like to say in the background as well, also joined by Danielle and Kirsty from the CSIC team, who will be making sure that everything runs smoothly from our side. So Danielle, could I have the first poll up, please? Great, and hopefully you should be able to see that. This will be up for about 30 seconds. And the poll is, have you introduced new technology in the last 3 months? Fairly straightforward, yes or no question. And as I said, I'll be talking about at the end about why we're starting to gather this kind of information. Okay, great. So see there that there is more of a focus on 56% have introduced new technology in the next 3 months, right? We will be expanding on that later on. So thanks for that, Danielle. And now we're going to move on to a quick overview of some of the technology that we at CSIC have seen being used. So Danielle, if you could bring up the slides, please. That's great, thank you. Okay, if you could move on to the next slide. And can everyone see that okay? I'm having... Danielle, I think there might be an issue with the size of the slide, certainly from my half. We'll just keep, yeah, that's fine. Yeah, if you want to just keep it on that, if it makes it easier, it's fine. We'll work from this one. Okay, so just to kick things off, very quick high-level overview of some of the types of technology that we've seen coming into play, and I'm going to talk on 3 different areas. And the first area is social distancing. Now, when lockdown hit, this was one of the main questions we got asked, was about how to maintain social distancing, particularly in a site-based environment, although it can equally apply to your office staff as well. Now, there are a lot of products out there in the market looking at this, a lot of firms developing technology in this area, majority of which will involve some form of wearable technology that is actually put on your staff. And first, most basic level of that is a proximity alarm sensor. So if 2 of your operatives come into close contact, an alarm is sounded and they know to move away, which is fine. And if that meets your requirements, that's great. But there's also would just like to highlight that you can take this a little bit further. If you are going to get your staff to wear technology, you can develop this a lot further. One of the areas that we've seen developing is contact tracing. Clearly, if one of your operatives or one of your staff members come down with coronavirus, you want to know who they've been in contact with. So that could be something that could be really vitally important. You can look at monitoring behavioural changes. Do you have a member of staff that consistently is coming into close contact with someone? Is there a reason for that? You could look at monitoring them. Some firms are even looking at health monitoring, not just from detecting early onset of COVID by perhaps temperature increase, but also the wider health of your staff. You could look at productivity monitoring and seeing how you can improve that, and even going as far as building up almost a digital twin of your site, looking at monitoring all the movements and developing a picture of what's happening. Now, clearly, with some of these, there are wider implications, particularly in terms of data protection and GDPR, but just wanted to flag up that there are wider options available out there. If you bring up the next slide, please, Tanya. So next area is reducing contact points. There's clearly the bottlenecks. One of the key bottlenecks that we found is access to a site, because your sites have to be secure. So everyone tends to come in and out through a slightly limited area. So what we saw was when lockdown hit and when people were getting ready to go back to site, things like some sites may have been using biometrics. That was taken out because clearly fingerprint scanning is not what you want, everyone's touching the same panel. But we have seen some firms pivot to using QR codes. This is technology that has been available for quite some time. It's well developed. And just by using your operatives' mobile phones, they can scan in with a QR code and scan out, where they are on site and where they've been. Another area, remote monitoring. Camera technology has been available for quite some time and has been used. Drones, for example, have been used successfully in the industry for a number of years. But could you look at projects where perhaps some members of your staff do not have to go to site? So you're reducing the numbers of staff going to site and reducing the possibility of contact points. And finally, looking at areas such as robotics, where perhaps, sorry, my screen's gone, let's come back. Tasks that required more than one person, could you look at that doing rather than two operatives? Could you look at one operative and a robot? Again, this is technology that's already out there and is being utilised in various sectors of the industry and also in other industries. We're currently looking at a project which is exoskeletons, which does sound quite futuristic, but is actually just taking technology that's already successfully used in oil and gas industry and pivoting it over into use in construction. And could I get the next slide, please, Tanya? And finally, the area of site management, which I think is something that some of our panelists are going to touch on as well. So with management software and operating in a post-COVID environment where there may be restrictions, and there probably with likelihood there will be future restrictions as well, depending on whether there are more waves. You can look at resource planning, you can look at risk managing, trying to help your site run as effectively and as efficiently as possible. You could look at, there are packages available offering remote expert advice, again, removing the need requirement for people to go to sites. I would say that you don't necessarily require a software package for that. You could just be as simple as a Zoom or a Skype call. Looking at asset tracking as well, it's a common area we've seen asked about. Monitoring your plant and equipment so you can help reduce losses and increase supply chain efficiency, which is advantageous at any time, regardless of whether we're operating in COVID or not. And finally, we're seeing the development of an awful lot of health and safety apps, moving things that perhaps were more paper-based in the past and moving them onto applications, looking at risk assessment method statements, doing inductions online. You could look at pre-start checks, and you can look at training. Now, this doesn't necessarily have to be 4 separate apps. There are apps out there that will cover all of these areas for you. And just on the aspect of training, just to finish up, I think it's important to recognise as well that training goes beyond health and safety. There may be other areas of skills, and companies are looking at, including ourselves, are looking at creating virtual learning platforms, so to ensure that your site, that your staff, site staff and office based, that their skills do not fall down because of the COVID, and that training can continue, particularly for younger members of staff as well, for your apprentices and things like that, who may find training more difficult under the current circumstances. Okay, so we can take those slides down, thanks. And if we can just go on to bring up the next poll, please. Great, so those of you that have introduced technology in the past, we would like to see if there's a chance of, what kind of technology have you introduced? So we would like to know if anyone's introduced looking at proximity detection, a site management software app, visual inspection technology, virtual learning systems, or robotics. So if you have introduced technology, if any of these are suitable for you, if you could let us know, that would be great. Okay, great, thanks. I can see the results up there. So thank you to everyone. So more virtual learning systems and visual inspection technology. Great, thank you very much. Okay, so now we'd like to move on to the Q&A session with our panelists. Now, I've given you a very quick overview who each our panelists are, but if at the start of their questions, if there's anything they would like to add to that, then please feel free. So we're going to move on to our first question, which is, what new challenges have you been able to solve with technology? And I would like to invite Stephen Kelso from CALA to share his views on that.
Good afternoon, Lindsay. Thank you. My name is Stephen Kelso. I'm the Group Design Manager for CALA Group in Scotland. Just it's a direct correlation to your question about the technology. Obviously, the biggest thing from the COVID was being put into lockdown, and obviously everybody remote working and getting everybody up and running and remote working and such like, which we had to do very quickly. So that was probably the biggest challenge faced by this, certainly with the sort of the COVID situation. Moving on from that, obviously the sites all shut down, and we had to look at how we were going to reopen them in a safe environment. So we looked at various different softwares which had very quickly come onto the market. So it was sort of infant technology, if you like. But we're trialling one at the moment, which basically sets a geofence up around the site, and it automatically logs you in once you've downloaded the app onto your phone. It can also do your track and trace, which means that it'll tell you if you're coming into close proximity to somebody and such like. But wider than that, from a site basis, we're now moving across to the platform Microsoft 365, which is going to be more of a cloud-based platform, which promotes the working from home environment much better. So we'll be moving across to that in the next sort of 2 or 3 months, once our IT get up to speed with it. And a couple of other points, obviously we're pre-COVID as well, and introducing new technologies. So we covered both our sort of product and our people with that. So the product was in terms of new technologies to sort of meet the growing demand for sustainable and renewable technologies and such. So there was a lot of learning that went on in the background with that as well. So we were looking at heat pump technology, PV technology, etc. The other thing from our people perspective, we are now moving forward with Autodesk looking at Revit and BIM for all our new products, which obviously helps our learning, and a lot of that's been done in a sort of virtual platform in terms of the sort of training and such like. So the past sort of 3, 4, 5 months or so has been very contained, shall we say, in terms of quickness of learning and adaptability. And I think moving forward, it's going to really set the precedence for us.
That's great. Thank you for that, Stephen. It's really interesting to hear about your experiences. So I'll move on to the next one. And I would say to everyone who's listening online, if you have any questions about anything that the panelists raise, then please get in touch and we will answer them towards the end. So next question, I'd like to invite Jason from Norscot, just to talk a bit about what technology has worked out and what do you think perhaps hasn't been as valuable for you?
Okay, as you say there, my name's Jason. I'm the Technical Director at Norscot Joinery. We're based in the far north of Scotland, approximately 12 miles from John O'Groats, where we manufacture mainly timber frame house kits, external windows and doors, and PVC timber and alley timber. We employ approximately 70 staff, both here in our other office in Inverness. And although we're in one of the most remote areas of Scotland, we do supply products all over the UK. We like to think we keep up to date with the latest technologies, and we've recently completed a KTP with regard to virtual reality and creating a virtual show home for our timber frame house kits, along with Strathclyde Uni, and started another KTP just recently with regard to Welby homes, alongside Teesside University, with regard to actually creating homes which look after the householder, and this mainly aimed at the self-build market. I think the main technology that we have been used over the lockdown period is virtual meetings. We have, as I say, we have an office in Inverness about 120 miles away, and are from the main office and factory. And being able to communicate during lockdown was very important, especially in planning and how we were going to move out of lockdown and get the factory back up and running. This technology is probably not new to everybody, but it's the first time we've really had to use it, mainly due to our internet connection. Because we're quite remote, we don't have a great internet connection. We don't have broadband. We have to rely on 4G internet connection. And data is quite expensive on 4G, so we try to keep a hold of our data as much as we possibly can, and things like Zoom and Teams tend to use up a lot of data. But while we're working from home during lockdown, most people, certainly the management side, had a decent broadband, and we were able to communicate quite easily during that. And I think that worked exceptionally well for us, and probably no surprise to everybody, for us it was definitely a really good option. One of the other problems we have with 4G was that accessing our files at the head office was very difficult. We couldn't remote into the servers here, so really nobody here at Norscot could work from home. We had no option. We had to shut the business down completely, and that was a bit costly for us and a bit difficult. There are ways, seemingly, now that we've come out of lockdown, that you can get around that, but they're quite difficult and quite expensive again. So that has been a bit of a difficulty for us. However, on our return to work, we've continued to use virtual communication in the workplace, especially as the movement within the factory and the offices has been restricted. We have people in the factory, we have people in the office. We don't want them wandering around speaking to everybody and communicating too closely. So being able to carry on using things like Zoom and Teams to share screens, use the chat functions and things like that to communicate and get across points has actually been really impressive for us to carry on doing that and keep our efficiency going. However, again, that has caused us issues with our internet connection, in that we're using nearly 5 times the amount of data that we were currently using before. And we're also now starting to experience some bandwidth issues. So hopefully, if nobody else is using Zoom at the moment, I'll have good connection just now. Although we believe we're very technologically aware, I think the recent lockdown and requirements of social distancing has highlighted how much as a company we still rely on face-to-face communication. I think this came as a big surprise for everybody, especially on the management side, because we always tend to think that we're up there with anybody else in technology, but when it actually comes down to it, we still actually rely very much on face-to-face. It's sort of highlighted by the fact that during lockdown, we basically issued a weekly update to all our staff members, and we emailed that to them, and we also put it onto our closed company Facebook page. Once the staff started returning from work, we began to realise quite quickly that maybe as little as 50% of our staff were actually seeing these updates. And we felt quite surprised at that, because we thought everybody would be reading emails and at least trying to keep up to date with everything. And I think since we've come back out of lockdown, or pretty much nearly out of lockdown, I think we're beginning to look into this a wee bit more. As a company, are we communicating with our staff properly? Or are they using other methods of communication? Communication as an industry and a technology is developing all the time. Snapchat, WhatsApp, TikTok. Are we, as a business, are we falling behind how people communicate? If so, how do we use these new ways of communicating? And more importantly, how do we keep up to date with the ever-changing communication landscape? And these are things we're starting to look at quite significantly. We're slightly different in our location, as our location has a large impact on our business, but we believe that it's not all bad, and that technology and innovation is the key to keeping our business at the forefront of our industry. We have just a few more challenges to deal with. Surprisingly, one of the main ones being access to good, cost-effective internet connection, especially as we start to move on to cloud-based applications, which are becoming more and more important, especially if we start to move into a remote location and get some sort of decent way of remoting into our service. We can actually be able to get stuff more cloud-based, which makes that difficulty less. And we're actually looking at different management softwares. We're also developing our own in-house management software to deal with communication with customers, quotations, and also moving into the production side as well. And that's something we're also wanting to look at, and along with the difficulties we're finding with communication that we're currently having with our staff and possibly even our customers.
Okay,
that's me. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you, Jason. I appreciate that. Really interesting as well to hear about the impact. Infrastructure has clearly had quite a different impact on your business than perhaps, Stephen, who's more central belt based. So really fascinating to hear about that. So for the next question, I'd like to bring in Jonathan Davies from Autodesk and just talk about for companies who have only started to explore using technology in a bigger way or looking to introduce technology in their organisation, large or small, how should they go about it?
Thanks, Lindsay. Yeah, so it's Jonathan Davies from Autodesk. I'm the account executive and cover probably Northern England and up to Scotland. In terms of the question, I had a long think about this. And again, the size of the company shouldn't really matter, because any company within the construction industry or related to that can use technology, be it from like your main large contractors right down to maybe just a small family dry lining company. So the technology is there. In terms of where you should start, I think you need to kind of ask yourself the question, right, where are we on the technology journey? Have we actually got any technology in place at the moment? And then the next question is, where do we want to go with that? So those are probably the two most important questions. I think it needs careful planning. So you need to, I wouldn't just jump into it and say, and say, right, let's get this technology and throw it onto, one of our sites or projects, because you can run the risk there. If the site aren't used to technology, the adoption rate is going to be extremely low, and then it'll fail, and you probably would have wasted a fair bit of money investing in the technology. So it's almost like a health check to see where you actually are, like a sanity check. Where are we as a business? And what technology do we actually need? So to give two extreme examples, you've probably got a main contractor who may be involved in everything from the design right through to the field, and they have all certain levels of technology there. And then there may be a smaller contractor at the other end who probably might not ever use any technology. So a simple one there is they may have an issue on site whereby they use kind of printed drawings. They're looking to kind of improve on that, to kind of save money, improve efficiency. So they may start at that end of the spectrum. Pretty much, I mean, the message is there's something for everyone there. You can start out, I always use the analogy, you can start out in a Ford Fiesta, you can still get to point A from A to B, or you can start out in maybe top-end Range Rover. That may suit you. It depends on what you are. But I think also a key question to ask on top of those other two questions was, why are we investing in technology? Why do we want technology on the site, or why do we need it in the office, for example? So some food for thought there. So hopefully that gives you a fairly good overview.
That's great. Thank you, Jonathan. It's good to hear quite a basic common sense approach that adopting technology doesn't necessarily have to be a complicated process. So thank you for that.
Correct. Thank you, Lindsay.
So for our next question, I'd like to bring in Stephen Milne from Census. And Stephen, I'd like to hear your thoughts on what do you see as the most valuable technologies in helping the construction sector get back to work safely and predictively into recovery, and what are your key tips in evaluating the most suitable solutions?
Thanks, Lindsay. So at Census we focus on Internet of Things technologies. So how can you measure, how do you use sensors to measure, and how do you gather that data and get it back to make it useful? We also do a lot in the imaging space as well. So pre-COVID, we did a lot in construction or kind of something facility management, looking at how you can manage buildings better remotely. So deploying sensors around buildings. One of the technologies we had was around water quality monitoring. So in any public building, they're mandated to actually test building water quality on a monthly basis. So we did an initial kind of proof of concept with Highland Council and Capita that has become a kind of fully fleshed out business with a company called M2M Cloud. And it was actually interesting, during COVID, Highland Council, the person who's in charge of water quality monitoring, was saying that that was the only thing they were allowed to actually monitor, because they weren't allowed access to buildings. So because they had this technology across their estate, they could use that technology to actually understand what's happening in the building, and that was the only thing they could really do in their job at that point, because they didn't have access to any facility. So it really kind of built the case, I guess, to show that that sort of remote monitoring technology could really be scaled up and show the real efficiency of it and how it could be used in business. Again, with COVID, it's interesting in your introduction, Lindsay, we had a huge amount of influx around the contact tracing, one of the fastest evolving tech kind of applications I've ever seen in Census. There was everything from kind of mobile phone apps, looking at an app and you'll be able to see how many people you've been in contact with, to kind of simple kind of Bluetooth bracelets that would basically set off an audible alarm if you're too close in contact with people. But we're increasingly seeing kind of more complex type applications now, or companies pivoting from other applications. So one application we've seen is a company in Edinburgh called ReactTech. So they produce a wearable looking for monitoring vibration injuries on construction sites. So it uses Bluetooth in their solution. So they actually pivoted that solution to contact tracing. And because they've already been across a lot of construction sites already, they've had quite a lot of success selling that solution initially and showing how you can use Bluetooth to track across a construction site. Other ones we've seen as well are slightly more complex solutions whereby a business will be able to deploy a kind of wide area network across a facility, building, construction site, and then it will monitor how long you've been in contact with certain staff. So it means the business can almost monitor risk factors. So it's really kind of evolved into that risk management aspect of contact tracing now. So a business could look at a pinch point, potentially understand right what's happening there, is a way we can improve that for our staff. And what that does is it uses that LoRaWAN technology to take the signal back to actually tell a central location exactly who's been in contact with where. And then at the end of a shift, you can actually almost get feedback on, right, actually you were in contact with that person for too long, what's happening in that area. So that whole area is still evolving quickly. And we're actually conducting a kind of test bed at the moment within the University of Glasgow, looking at how technology can be used. So we've got a mix of different technologies, really, like things like looking at counting how many people are in different rooms, having displays outside the room so people know before they enter the room that there's maybe too many people in that space. So just kind of really reducing the risk factors around that. All the way down to kind of more simple technologies, looking at kind of office cleaning, so understanding kind of cleaning regimes. If someone's sat at a desk, they've left that desk, it should maybe send an alert to say that desk needs clean before someone else can occupy it. So smart office type technology, I've seen quite a lot of evolution in as well. The other big thing from Census perspective we see a lot of is around tracking, so asset tracking on site. A lot of the new IoT standards that are coming in are ideal for tracking assets around construction sites. So we can see with COVID, this whole kind of uptake of these technologies will start to get driven a lot more because people will understand potentially how they can use asset tracking technologies to really increase efficiency within that built environment. And finally, on the imaging side, it's really exciting space for us as Census. What we're seeing is the actual technologies for that are coming down in cost a lot now. So you can do quite advanced machine vision type analytics now with very low cost bits of kit. So we're seeing machine vision applications and things like dispute resolution on site, looking at safety as well. So where heavy machinery is operation, you can maybe have machine vision looking for potentially people entering those areas. We've also seen it for applications like looking at actually mapping construction sites on a weekly basis, so they can actually look at how that construction site's evolving. So all technologies like that will eventually link into the BIM modeling type applications. You'll start to see kind of connected technologies move into that, hopefully, and that will kind of increase a lot of productivity and efficiency in the construction site. And to answer your question as well, but how do you evaluate the most suitable solution? Is definitely start off with a test site first. It's particularly with kind of these connected sensor type technologies, you don't want to go for a quick massive rollout across a lot of the business. You want to pick one site that's maybe a challenging test site that's maybe got difficult areas for monitoring, test it first, check the requirements, and that will let you learn exactly what you need from the technology and hopefully kind of take that up. If it's right for you, you can kind of evolve that and use that across your business and roll out, scale it across what you're doing. So yeah, so that's everything for me. I'll forward to your question.
That's great, thank you, Stephen. And certainly I would agree with that. Proximity detectors have been one of the growth industries of 2020. We saw there was an awful lot of movement in that area recently. So for our next question, I'd like to move on to John Simpson from Robertson. And John, get your thoughts on what digital tools have you used to model safe operational procedures on site and how effective have they been?
Thanks, Lindsay. So yeah, my name's John Simpson, Head of Digital Construction for the Robertson Group. My role primarily is about BIM implementation within the construction business of the Robertson Group. And when things started to kick off and sites were closing down, we mobilised quite quickly and saw an opportunity where our real skill set is in the 3D modelling aspect of things. So how can we start to model our sites, or an exemplar site just now that is live? We know it's set up, but now when we're going to introduce things like social distancing and the changes that we're going to come about, what does that mean to the site? How can we visualise site setup, how people move around the site, how plant will move around the site, so that we can understand that our operating procedures safe, are they efficient, and going forward, how would that affect our productivity on the sites? You know, how almost look at the programme. You know, we've lost time while sites have been closed, but once we kick back in, what's that productivity going to look like? But let the site operative see in advance, here's an animation of how this site and how the COVID operating procedures will work. Here's what social distancing will mean, how many people we can have in the offices, the canteens, certain workspaces, depending on what type of activity you're doing. You know, if you've got heavy equipment, heavy materials you're lifting, and you need more than one person to do that, is the space safe that you're going to be working in? Do extra measures need to be put in place? And that became a really powerful communication tool for us, because it let people understand that actually the operating procedures we had were safe, they were well within the guidelines, and we were making them work, and actually making them work probably to a higher level of safety than we really needed to. But it became, we were using it not just internally but externally. So there were obviously conversations going on with the construction sector and the government at the time. We were able to present that and show, here's how we are going to approach this, how we can get our sites open safely, and over a period of time make them even, you know, as safe as they can be. But when we've done that, we realised that moving forward, looking at these sites, how do we take that modelling and not just say, right, we've done the operating procedures part, how do we take that on? So if we look at 4D build simulations as an example, something we're being asked just now is, if we go into a lockdown again, or there is a second wave of COVID just now, how would that affect programmes? What would your construction programme look like without COVID? What would it look like with? And all of a sudden, we're taking that information we had and we're turning it and showing two different simulations. What would the programme look like? And that communication again, and visualising how a project might change, how productivity might change, how setup and operating procedures might need to change depending on the circumstances. So it's not just taking that for one thing, it's reusing that information and getting as much out of it as we can. And then as we go forward, how can we start to link that to our site management? We're talking about asset tagging, tracking and all that, and take it from those 3D models right at the start of the project all the way through construction and bring all this together. I think the one thing we've all seen is access to information, and our ability to access information from multiple locations and as much as we can in one location is becoming even more important. And I'm hoping that certainly the steps we've taken with this technology is going to make us put us in a better place going forward.
Right, great, thank you for that, John. It's great to get the oversight of what you've been doing. Just a reminder to everyone who's out there, we'd welcome any question and answers. Some have been sent in already, and we will try to answer as many as possible. We will shortly be coming to the audience Q&A session, so if you have any further questions, please get them in now. So just to finish up with our set questions, just for the second last one, just a question for Stephen Kelso and Jason. We'd just like to know, from an industry perspective, how have you approached your tech strategies, and would you do anything differently? Stephen, do you want to jump in on that one first, and then we'll move over to Jason?
Yeah, certainly. Again, there's probably the two approaches from ourselves. We're looking at the product and the people. From a product perspective, in terms of technologies, it's generally regulatory driven. The government targets that they've set, etc. We will look at that in terms of the site, the location. The biggest constraint with new technologies is infrastructure, whether it be broadband width, actually getting power to the sites, etc., to deal with the new technologies to drive us towards a sort of net zero carbon base that we're all kind of striving towards. So I think from an infrastructure perspective, we've done a lot of collaboration work with power companies, etc. And I think that's key to how we move things forward, is the collaboration. what we've done, we've had a lot of meetings, you know, Zoom, WebEx, Teams, all these different platforms have aided that productivity of pulling people together that would normally take you an hour or 2 hours travelling to actually go and have a face-to-face meeting with. You know, so we've reduced the time and therefore we've made it more productive by using these kinds of technologies. In terms of our people from our tech strategy, we've got to look at it as a UK base. We've got regions all over the UK. We're also governed by a larger body, which is Legal and General as well. So there's a lot of assessment and judgment calls go into the different types of technology that we're looking at. And we found, much like some of my other colleagues on the panel today, that a lot of technology came to the forefront very quickly, a lot of untested technology. And it's trying to sift through that technology to find the best fit for each business and what they're looking for from that technology. So, you know, we speak to our regions very regularly, and we speak to our exec board members and make the best judgment call on what that tech strategy is going to be on a wider front. Jumping back to the sort of product, that can be on a site-by-site basis. So there's a couple of different strategies that we'll employ depending on what it is that we're actually trying to deliver in terms of our sort of final product and handover. It's interesting because technology is evolving at such a rate at the moment. You can't hang your hat on something and that's going to be you for the next sort of 4 or 5 years. There's a lot changing in terms of regulations and government sort of targets that over the next sort of 5 to 10 years, technology is going to play a very critical part in that. And it's being aware that we're on target for it and we're not behind the curve. Cal, I like to think that they're a bit of a leader in terms of the developer industry, and I would like to think I'm helping on that front as well. So to get that moving forward, we just need to keep our finger on the pulse and make sure that we're making the best call at the best point in time. And so far, we've not been far off the mark, but like I say, we don't know what's around the corner in terms of technology and what could be the next saving grace, if you like, for what we need to do to achieve our targets. So it's a bit of an overview of kind of how we would approach the sort of tech strategies side of things, from both our product perspective and how our people would deal with, and let's say collaboration and speaking to people, whether it's virtually or face-to-face, is the key to that.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. And Jason, same question for you. How have you approached the tech strategy from an industry perspective, and would you have done anything differently? Jason, you're on mute.
Right, yes, right. We're slightly different in that being a smaller business, our technology advancements have sort of been a little bit more traditional up until the last few years, and that we tend to look at it in-house and try to develop it in-house with the capacity that we've already got. And that basically limits a little bit of your understanding and how you can develop technology and how you can use it within your business. And I think recently we've become involved, as I mentioned previously, we've become involved in some KTP projects, knowledge transfer projects, and we've been involved with the Construction Scotland Innovation Centre, and we would sort of highly recommend going down these routes and getting involved with academia to help you with your technology advancements, especially for smaller businesses maybe don't have that ability or understanding within the current company strategy. I think the input and research abilities of academia can be very helpful in giving any business a greater understanding of the technologies and also how they're going to develop, because as Stephen just says just now, they develop very quickly, they change very quickly, and you have to be on top of that with any new technology that you do. And we've found that the benefits of having something like a KTP is really good for the whole business, and it keeps you up to speed with exactly what's happening and what's out there, and the backup that you get is exceptional. And that's the way we sort of tend to work now, and we go along that lines. But I think looking back at how we would maybe change things, I think one of the main things that we would do is when we originally started the first KTP, it was about a 2 to 3 year project, and I think one of the things that we thought 2 to 3 years is a long time, we'll just get started and go along. But I think what you tend to forget is as soon as you lose time at the start, it's very difficult to make it up. So as soon as you start any project like that, is to push it as quick as you possibly can, right from day one and right up to the end, because once you lose any time or there's any time lost at all, it's very difficult to make it up. And finally, I think one of the other things that's really important for the whole company is embrace any development of technology within the company. Don't treat it as an individual element within your business model. I think we've possibly been a little bit guilty of that in the past. And yes, you do end up having a technology or an innovation within your business which you can help develop, but it stands alone within your business. Bring it into the business, bring everybody in the business into the team, and actually what you'll find is it won't just help develop the actual project that you're working on, it also helps develop the whole business, the whole team, the staff, everybody's involved in it. They get to feel a bit more connected to the project, and also they learn a lot from what innovation and academia's got to offer. And I think that's one of the biggest benefits we've found from doing that, is seeing that change within our own business, having that involvement from outside influences, and you can see them. Maybe it's because we are still quite remote here, but maybe it's because of that. But that is one of the biggest things that we would have probably done differently, and I think we are possibly doing differently second time round. So hopefully that's the changes that I would have made.
Okay, that's great. Thank you for that, Jason. And final question, and Jason and Stephen, you've touched on this a little bit already in some of your answers, so I think I'll go to Jonathan, John and Stephen for this one, is how should you value or how should you measure return on investment from technology investment? What should you be looking at? And Jonathan, if I could get your thoughts on that, that would be great.
Thanks a lot. Yeah, this is probably one of the key things to consider when you're investing in technology, is why you're doing it, and also what is the return on investment. So how do you actually measure it? Well, that probably goes back to, you know, exactly what type of technology you're invested in. So for example, you may look at, is it time saved, or what the impact of that is on the actual build or the project? You know, is efficiency improved, productivity? These are all kind of parameters where you need to kind of look at and then benchmark it. And it can be worked back, so you can say, if we invested X in the software, we've got Y back, so therefore we've, you know, the return is whatever it is, you know. I think there's also hidden things of investing in technology, because if you're recording more information, you've got more data. That data could be used at any point. For example, you may have finished the project, and then you actually may have something like a dispute. So if you've got all that data recorded there, then it will help you kind of no end to for any dispute or anything, you know, after the actual project's finished. So yeah, I think it's important to look at all areas on what the impact of the technology is, and then link it back, because everyone at the end of the day, you're not going to invest unless you've got a return on your investment there. So look at everything really.
Okay, thank you, Jonathan. John, be interested to hear your thoughts. I mean, some of the technology you were talking about almost at the start, it had almost had an impact on staff well-being. You know, it's just something that's maybe not traditionally measured. Is there anything else you would like to add to Jonathan's comments?
I think it's understanding the problem you're trying to find a solution for with your technology. Too many people will rush to buy and invest in technology because it's the in thing, but it's actually not what they need. What we've seen is that we've not invested in, you know, huge amount across the board. We've tried to focus in on the things that we can see real return on not quickly, but you're not going to see small things. You can see quite a big return on investment quite quickly. You know, if we look at site, you know, what I was talking about earlier, the site setups, we are turning around bids quicker. If we can set that and turn around that part of a bid process quicker, we're helping those teams be more efficient. So look at the problem you're trying to figure out, and then measure that, how well that solution's worked.
Okay, that's great. Thank you, John. And Stephen, any other further points you would like to add to Jonathan and John's comments?
Yeah, I mean, I said before about doing that kind of initial test for it. That's a good way to kind of work out what additional value you might get from the data, because it's really, particularly with digital technologies, you're going to compare it to what you did before, but you might not even realize about the extra benefit you get from the data that gets generated. So it's looking at kind of what is collected, what are the kind of secondary benefits of that data, and then how can you use that to benefit the business. And with a lot of the kind of connected technologies we work with as well, it's about investing a little bit in the initial infrastructure. So for like a communications network that you might have on a building site, and then once you've got that in place, you can hang a lot more applications off it. So it's about kind of looking at, right, we've got that now, we've got that infrastructure, so what else can we do with this? What else can we add to it? What else will give us value? So we see a lot in that area as well, whereby it's not just one application, it's multiple applications will add up to value. So sometimes you might struggle to really sell one small application, it's quite a niche application, but by using that, you can really get benefit for a lot of other different types of technology as well. So it's really understanding what you can do with it and what's the potential, what has been done elsewhere, looking at kind of best practice and then seeing how that can be applied really to your organisation.
Okay, that's great. Thank you, Stephen. So quick break from the questions now before we go to audience Q&A, just to give our panelists a chance to get a drink of water and things. So we're just going to go to our third poll, if we could bring that up, please. And we would just like to know, are you looking to introduce new technology in the next year? Just yes, no, or possibly. So fairly simple one there. Okay, so quite a potentially for possibly there. All right, thank you for that, everyone. All right, and we will move on to the audience question and answer now. Our first question is from Claire Reid. Claire would like to, is interested to understand what the panel thinks could help accelerate the changes they have described. Is it training? Is it digital infrastructure? Is it financial support? Would anyone like to jump in on that, or?
Do you want me to jump in on that training one there?
Thank you, Jonathan. Yeah.
Yeah, on the training, it's going back to what I said. When you get this new technology, it's so key that that initial kind of implementation, the onboarding, the training, that's all done. So everyone knows exactly how that's going to work. Because if you put technology onto a project, onto a site, and no one knows how to use it, there's going to be huge issues there. It won't get adopted and it won't get used, unfortunately. So the training is a key kind of area for it. I think that's what Claire was asking there on that training element side.
Okay, that's great. Thank you, Jonathan. I mean, Jason, clearly infrastructure has played has been a very different experience for you than it has been for perhaps some of the other panelists.
Yeah, you guessed. I was just going to say that infrastructure is key, and especially on sites, because obviously sometimes data and getting internet connection on sites can be difficult. Anything to do with IoT and like that is always going to be difficult if you're in a remote location and the internet connection's very difficult. Although 4G does work quite well that way. I think financial support, that's always the easy answer. That was always yes. Financial support's always going to be a good one. Everyone's always going to tell you it's going to be helpful. But I don't think that's the critical thing. I think, as Jonathan says, training is probably key, and digital infrastructure for me is the most important. Money's always going to be helpful, but if it means there's always a way. But as long as you've got the infrastructure there and you've got the training in there, then most people will work with it quite well.
Okay, that's great. Thank you, Jason. Any other panelists want to jump on that one before I move on to the next question? No. Okay, great. Interesting question here from Roddy Cormack. Has your technology strategy simply been accelerated down to an already set direction of travel due to COVID-19, or has it shifted entirely? Is this a new way that you wouldn't have gone down before? And if that is the case, should things continue? What will happen if things return to normal? John, I'd be interested in your views on this one.
It's accelerated parts of it. I wouldn't say a paradigm shift. I think the biggest shift has been home working and how mobile people are, making sure they have the correct IT equipment. You know, are their laptops powerful enough that they can handle running the digital aspect, the 3D modeling side of things for us. There were elements such as wearables that were on our roadmap strategy over the next few years. That's been accelerated. You know, so there is a bigger push now to make sure that's there. So it depends on what part of digital and what part of our digital strategy we'd be looking at. Things that, again, like VR, it was a huge part of the strategy. possibly looking at how its application may change going forward. You know, will you be have the same access to sharing VR headsets now as you would have 6 months ago? So how does that affect the project? What part of our strategy do we need to look at that may change? But I don't think a paradigm shift from our perspective. I think small changes and slight acceleration.
Okay, thank you, John. And Stephen Kelso, from Cala's point of view, it does sound like a lot of this was, again, this was something that was already on your horizon, really. Yeah,
I was going to say, I'd mentioned Microsoft 365. Now, that was something that we talked about at the turn of the year as we were going to be moving to the 319, the COVID situation has probably accelerated that. And it was the direction of travel. It's still going to be the direction of travel. And it will help with the new norm, because what we are saying is you can work remotely now. You know, the whole 9 to 5, Monday to Friday in an office environment, I think it's now been kind of kicked into touch with a lot of businesses. And we've found that by working remotely and getting pushed down that route, essentially by the lockdown, we have made it work. We now need to trim the edges off of that to make it work more smoothly. And that was the sort of route that we went down with the sort of 365. John mentioned there about sort of VR technology and AR technology. That's something that we're looking at as well to enhance the experience from our customers' perspective, you know, so that they can sit in the comfort of their own home, walk around, select their options, you know, these types of things. So again, it's things that were talked about previously, but have now been accelerated in that kind of process. So it's probably just, yeah, it's the answer to that one, that things have accelerated.
Okay, thank you. And Stephen Mill this time, just be interested from Sense's point of view, is this something that you're seeing as well, you know, like where companies already have this on the horizon and it's really just been an acceleration rather than a complete change of direction?
Yeah, definitely. I think quite often as well, a lot of people are a bit suspicious about technology coming into a business, particularly if they think about impact their jobs or change the kind of standard method of operations. So with this, I think because some of it is almost solutions have been necessary to come in quickly, I think it's really quite helped that uptake, and it lets people understand what technology can do. They might have previously been a little bit resistant to it, so it's very much kind of just letting people see the full potential, and then gets buy-in across the companies rather than just kind of from a digital person in the company pushing it. People across the company can really understand how they can get benefit. So yeah.
Great, thank you, Stephen. So I'll move on to our next question from Isra Solomon, which is something I'm sure that is troubling a few people at the minute. Have you got any tips for 2020 graduates in a construction degree? Now, I think Stephen Kelso, I'll go to you first.
Yes, I mean, I think from a construction perspective, it's looking and keep an eye on the technology. I've mentioned before, the technology is changing at an ever increasing rate. You've just got to be aware of the technologies that are out there and how they factor into construction, both from the management perspective and actually how you erect and move forward on sites and such like. I think that would be the sort of the biggest tip is technology. That is going to be the way forward. I did an exercise with Heriot-Watt University, and it was their third year graduates, both in construction management and surveying and the architectural side. And we set them a task of actually looking at what is coming forward in new technologies. And I was amazed at the sort of wondrous ideas that they had. And these are the guys that will take these through to fruition, you know, from 3D concrete buildings, you know, where they set it up like a 3D printer on site, to various other, some were a bit more weird and wonderful than others, but there's certainly some good things in there. So I think the courses are getting set up more so to kind of focus on that as well. But that was certainly a good thing that we got involved in from a developer's perspective, and really helping the learning of ourselves and the graduates that were taking part in that.
That's great, Stephen, thank you. And John, any tips for graduates coming into the industry? What would you, anything that you could recommend?
I may be biased here, but if you can start to get your head around 3D models, how they act, how you can interact with them, obviously depending on which specific construction degree, you know, is it out on site, is it, you know, going to surveying, project management. I think at times, having done a master's myself recently, the 3D aspect of some of the university courses is missing. They're still very traditional in what they're teaching. And then graduates are coming out, they're being thrust into a more digital environment in terms of 3D modelling and that. And I think it's quite important if you can go in somewhere and have that experience and knowledge of how to navigate a 3D model and understand the benefits it can bring you, you start to set yourself apart and you can help other people with that kind of attitude.
Okay, thank you. And Jason, our last industry perspective, anything you would recommend to graduates coming into, new graduates coming into the industry?
Again, I think, as John says there, understanding 3D modelling, and it's actually an avenue of design which is changing rather quickly. It's actually changing very, very quickly. I know we talked about Revit earlier on and BIM modelling and things like that. We use Revit here, and the add-ons and things that you can get for Revit and 3D modeling and all the other different softwares that you can use is changing and developing very, very quickly. And I think for somebody who's coming out of that sort of background to have a bit of an understanding of how that works is actually always going to be good. And again, I always tend to find that when they come out from whatever they've learned at university or whatever, the technology is maybe sometimes slightly behind what's actually out in the workplace. So if they could maybe get a hold of the most up to date and learn it and understand it, even if it's just understanding how it works, is always a good thing. And I think that's changed days from back in the days of the old-fashioned CAD as well, because when I was coming through, it was basically like a pen CAD. Anybody could use CAD and pick it up. It was actually having the understanding how to use the software. What to use the software for was actually more important than actually using the software. But I think that is now changing. The software is now becoming quite important because it does a lot more than just show you things in 3D. It can analyze data, it can cost things out. There's a lot more that this stuff they can do, and to be able to understand all that is actually really important. And as I'm not too sure if there's anything else I can add to that. I was just trying to think if there's anything else. Just basically just try to get out there, go and see and visit as much as you can. There's industry roadshows, maybe not physical ones, but online ones. You can go and look, see what's actually happening out there in the industry, see what's developing, what the new technologies are, what the new way of modern methods of construction are. Look at those, see what you find very interesting, and then actually try to look more into that and maybe go down that route, because if you find yourself more interested in it, you're probably going to enjoy that more than you would any other industry, and that was possibly the way to go down. That's probably the only sort of tips I would give anybody at this point in time.
All right, thank you. I hope that's useful to any of the graduates that are on the call. And final question before we wrap up, and I'd like to put this to Jonathan and to Stephen Milne. What do you think the next trend in digital technology will be? Is there anything that you've seen coming through that you think, yeah, that's going to be big? Jonathan, if you want to go first.
Yeah, there's I mean, the technology, it's always changing all the time. So if we just look at the recent pandemic with COVID-19, we did something very simple at Autodesk in that people were using Zoom, so we integrated Zoom, so you have it directly on your BIM 360 solution there. It's there, it's easy. In terms of where it goes in the future, and there's again so much technology coming out. I think it is probably going to go more down the AI route and things, more predictive kind of analysis. So when you've got this data, you know, currently we've got a lot of data that you offer there, but I think the next step is reading that data and kind of predicting trends, so that before something even happens on site, the data that you have there can actually kind of almost like flag it up. So I think it's going to go more down that route, you know, personally.
Okay,
I'm sure there'll be other additions to that, you know.
Thank you, Jonathan. And Stephen, anything you'd like to add to that before we wrap up?
Yeah, definitely that integration of data as well. Right? It kind of streams together in one place to maybe link into kind of project management software, BIM type software as well. From our perspective of Sensis, we're doing a lot now in the AI space as well, machine learning space, looking at processing information on device. So as that gets cheaper, faster, you start doing a lot more complex at quite low cost. So you can almost deploy devices around various different areas at quite low cost now to start monitoring and then analysing video streams without having to send video streams up to the cloud. You almost extract the useful data, and from that you can make decisions. So I think that will come into construction, and particularly in the safety aspects. I think that'll start moving in first, looking at kind of how to identify potential risk factors on site. So that I mean cuts across a lot of different technology areas, but it will drive a lot of change and a lot of application.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. Well, thank you to all our panelists there. Stephen from CALA had to drop off, unfortunately, due to another call. But just to finish up, we will move on to our final poll, if that could be brought up, please. And we just want to know, what are the 3 main barriers to adopting digital technology in your organisation? Do you think it's resistance to change? Is there a lack of a suitable solution to what you're trying to look at? Lack of internal expertise, or time to implement? If we could just get your thoughts on that, that would be great. A bit of a mix there, but not lack of internal expertise. So that's an interesting one there. Okay, thank you for that. So, thank you everyone for attending. I'd like to thank our panelists for their expertise and their time. I'd like to thank everyone who attended and for the questions that were submitted. Just to finish up, a bit of housekeeping. I mentioned there was a reason why we are looking at these polls. The reason is basically watch this space. We are looking at launching an initiative on the digital area to help the industry. As Jonathan said, look at a bit of a health check and break it down into sort of easily understood chunks about what, if you want to adopt digital, what the steps are. So can't talk about it too much at the minute, it's still in development, but if you bear with us, we'll be launching that hopefully in the near future. Following up from this, there will also be a feedback form issued. We'd love to hear your feedback on all the webinars. It helps us improve. So if you could return that once it's issued, that would be great. Thank you very much. And I'd just like to thank you all for attending, and hopefully we'll see you all at another webinar soon. Thank you very much.